NBC 10 political commentator Sue O'Connell is here with us right now. Sue, it seems that there are two things to mourn when it comes to Charlie Kirk. One being that he was a human, he was a husband, he was a father, and he was killed violently and suddenly and publicly. Two, and this is more for Republicans, what Charlie Kirk brought to the Republican Party, specifically MAGA, what has that movement lost now that it is without someone like Charlie Kirk?
So, Colton, Charlie Kirk was the Republican secret sauce with young voters. Look, he made conservative politics actually cool on college campuses. And I've heard from so many people who had no idea who Charlie Kirk was until his tragic murder. Now, those in the Democratic Party or in the progressive movement, they have repeatedly, before and after Charlie Kirk's death, pointed to Turning Point USA, that's Kirk's organization, as exactly what Democrats and progressives should have been and should be doing, but aren't. So Kirk obviously cannot be replaced, and it's too soon to see what the future for Turning Point is. But he inspired a generation of Gen Z conservatives, so his legacy is definitely going to continue.
After Kirk's death, social media, for the most part, it was divided largely into two sort of camps here. The people who were online who mocked him, and his fans who demanded that people online not only be quiet online, but fired from their jobs in real life. Why did this suddenly become more about what people are saying versus the motivation of the suspect?
That's a great question, Colton. It's the problem with our politics right now. We can't even mourn properly without turning it into another culture war battle. Now, instead of us all focusing on why a 22-year-old felt compelled to commit murder out of seemingly nowhere, we're more interested in policing each other's reactions and weaponizing grief for political points. You know, if you go to the grocery store or you go to the Red Sox game, people are just living their lives together in peace. But if you spend 5 minutes on social media, you think it would be impossible for us to even share the same checkout line without a riot breaking out. So I think maybe all of us should spend a little less time offline and focus on why America has so much more political violence and gun violence than any other democracy in the world.
All right.
As an employee, we don't have a right to free speech. If you're selling Toyotas and then decide to sell a Honda, you get in trouble. Your employer can fire you or discipline you for what you say on the job or even online sometimes. Now, ABC, like other TV networks, stations, radio stations, we're on publicly owned airwaves. So the federal government, via the FCC, they regulate complaints, licenses, they approve deals. The government is not allowed to regulate speech on those airwaves beyond what the law says. So if ABC had just independently decided that Kimmel crossed a line, they can do whatever they want. But if what happened is FCC Chair Brendan Carr threatened, as he said on other shows, to take action against Disney and ABC, he did say the FCC could move to revoke ABC's affiliate licenses as punishment, so you have that hanging out there. Look, you don't need a constitutional law degree like the Boston College professor to see that that would be a violation of the First Amendment.
This debate has been going on for the last 24 hours. If it is a clear-cut case of someone infringing on Kimmel's and ABC's right to free speech, then how would that play out as a lawsuit? I mean, could you see that happening?
No, because ABC, Disney, CBS, Paramount, they've already paid Trump $16 million each to settle lawsuits that he brought that legal experts said were completely winnable. And ABC suspended Kimmel this indefinitely, hours before Carr's threats, without any legal fight or pushback. So I'd say it's more likely that Donald Trump will sue Jimmy Kimmel.
With that, we do want to bring in our NBC 10 political commentator, Sue O'Connell. Sue, let's go to the past. Let's go back to January 6, 2021. As the Capitol was being ransacked that day, it took the White House and President Trump hours to acknowledge the trouble and assist with getting reinforcements. Today, if you take a look, D.C.'s murder rate is low, but now President Trump thinks the city is a mess and it needs the National Guard. Help us fill in the gaps here of why he came to that conclusion.
Well, Priscilla, I just need 2 words to fill in the gaps: Epstein files. There are definitely problems in D.C., but not the mayor, not the citizens, not the police force. None are asking for the National Guard to step in. So why then is Trump sending them? So that we spend our time talking about that instead of the Epstein files.
Let's talk now with NBC 10 political commentator Sue O'Connell.
Sue, is there a strategy in doing this interview, or is this just Hunter Biden settling scores and blowing off steam with a lot of expletives?
Well, listen, JC, as you know, no one loves a Nepo baby meltdown more than me. But if there's a strategy here, I don't see it. Look, I want to be clear. Until recently, Hunter Biden was living in a $4 million home in Malibu, and I am not. So clearly he's doing something right. He may be brilliant at strategically leveraging his name and his relationship with his dad, but this looked just like part of the grievance tantrum tour to me.
All right, Sue, let's review the list. George Clooney, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and most of the people in Obama's cabinet and in his campaign. I mean, we're talking about a lot of people.
Podcast hosts.
Yes, that he is blaming for forcing his father out. And he says that brought about a Trump second term. So while I guess that's not entirely surprising, what is surprising is the number of Democrats online who appear to think he's absolutely right.
So the Democrats are in the midst of an identity crisis right now. On the one hand, you have some Democrats who are doing some deep soul searching, and on the other hand, some still deep in denial, and I count Hunter Biden in that camp. I mean, look, the Democrats just released a post-election audit that didn't even consider whether Biden should have run for re-election, whether he should have exited the race earlier than he did, and whether former Vice President Kamala Harris should have been the candidate. So the Dems have a lot of problems, and I think Hunter Biden is just adding to them.
Sue, Trump says protests against ICE are an insurrection. He might need to use the military. But the last time a president did this was during the 1992 LA riots when 63 people died. So are today's protests really that serious? Or is Trump exaggerating to justify sending in troops?
JC and Glenn, it's not even close to the same thing. The 92 riots were an explosion of violence with dozens dead and billions of dollars in damages. LA was actually burning. What's happening now are protests indeed, with clashes, yes, but nothing near that scale. And Trump is using these big scary words like insurrection to make these normal protests look like a war zone so he can justify the military occupation of cities.
Yeah, we've heard that from Democrats as well, so that the president is stirring up chaos on purpose so he has an excuse to militarize cities. Meantime, Trump's team says protesters are violently attacking ICE agents, and that's a real crisis. So who's right here? It seems like only one of them can be.
So Trump literally called Democrats like insurrectionists today over the government shutdown. But let's remember that during the 2020 George Floyd protests, he called protesters thugs and said when the looting starts, the shooting starts, even though we now know that 93 to 96% of those protests were completely peaceful. And yes, there was a violent attack on an ice field office in Texas. Yet the National Guard wasn't deployed to Texas. In fact, the Texas Guard is being sent out to other places. So it looks like this is a classic projection that Trump is manufacturing this crisis by having federal agents tear gas protesters and then labeling anyone who objects as an insurrectionist just to justify even more military force in cities. Now, the best that can happen here is that this is the suppression of free speech rights. The worst is it's a federal government using the military to attack its own citizens for legal political dissent.